Joining us now is the Honorable David Yost, who became the 51st Attorney General on January 14th of 2019. Attorney General Yost earned his undergraduate degree from The Ohio State University and a law degree from Capital University. After working as a Columbus Citizen Journal reporter, he began his public service career as a Delaware County auditor and then prosecutor. As prosecutor of Delaware County, he won the first ever capital case in Delaware County and took down one of the largest drug rings in the county's history. Attorney General Yost will be discussing the current initiatives he is shepherding and bringing to help our veterans. We now welcome the Honorable Attorney General Yost. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. Although we're here talking about all veterans, I want to start by talking about the experience of one particular veteran, because I think his life illustrates the problem our country has in dealing with the warriors who return home with deep emotional and psychological scars from combat. His name is Ira Hayes. He was a Pima Indian, born in 1923 and raised on the Gila River Indian Reservation in southwest Arizona. If you've been to that part of Arizona, you know what a parched and barren piece of real estate that is. And like most members of Native American tribes, the Pima people have had plenty of reasons to resent their treatment at the hands of the United States of America. But in spite of that, when the United States entered World War II, Ira Hayes enlisted in the Marines. He was just 19 years old. Over the next 3 years, Hayes fought in a number of South Pacific actions against the Japanese. Those actions were just a warm-up to one of the most horrific and brutal battles of the Pacific War, the Seabourn invasion of the island of Iwo Jima. U.S. commanders expected the island to fall quickly, perhaps as little as a week. Instead, it took nearly 5 weeks, and there was nothing easy about it. The 21,000 Japanese defenders were hidden and dug in fortified bunkers connected by miles of tunnels. They could appear suddenly out of nowhere, fire on the American invaders, and then vanish again. They killed almost 7,000 Marines with hidden machine guns, sniper fire, and mortars, landmines. Thousands more were wounded. And the enemy was virtually invulnerable to American artillery or rifle fire. So the Marines had to go in and burn them out with flamethrowers, one bunker, one tunnel at a time. They say war is hell. On Iwo Jima, it was the deepest circle of hell. Human beings were actually being burned alive. You're probably revolted and shocked just imagining it. Imagine seeing it with your own eyes. Ira Hayes was there for the entire nightmare, and he was one of only 5 Marines in his 45-member platoon to survive the engagement. On the 5th day of battle, Hayes took part in an action that would immortalize him. He and 5 other Marines climbed up the only high point on the island, Mount Suribachi. At the summit, they planted the United States flag, an event recorded in one of the most famous photographs of the war. You've all seen it, 6 Marines straining to raise a flagpole with the stars and stripes. The photo was later turned into the epic sculpture that stands at one end of the Arlington National Cemetery. And within 2 days of that event, 2 of those 6 Marines, friends of Ira Hayes, also were killed. A third was wounded and evacuated. But that photo became a sensation back home, and Hayes became a national hero. He was shipped back to the States to use his fame to help sell war bonds. At the White House, he was hailed as a hero by President Harry Truman. In a little more than a month, he went from hell, watching friends die and people burned to death, to being lionized by adoring crowds who had no clue what he'd witnessed. We can only imagine how his mind and spirit were whipsawed by these incompatible experiences, especially for a young man who's just barely out of his teens. Soon after, Japan surrendered and Ira Hayes was demobilized and sent home to Arizona. After surviving the war and after being hailed as a national hero, Hayes was now in his final battle. It was one he would lose. This time, the enemy was alcoholism and survivor's guilt. In the years after the war, he bounced from job to job and jail to jail. He was arrested 52 times for alcohol-related charges as he drifted around the country. Though people still sought him out as a hero of Iwo Jima, he continued to be tortured by his experiences there. And time and again, he tried to drown the memory in alcohol. He once said, quote, "I was sick. I guess I was about to crack up thinking about all my good buddies. They were better men than me, and they're not coming back. Much less to the White House, like me." It reminds me of a friend I had back in Delaware County who's gone on to his eternal reward, a veteran of World War II, D-Day. He came to my house one night to have dinner with me and my children and to recount his experiences. My wife said, "You're a hero." He said, "No, I'm not a hero. The heroes are still back there on the beach." In November 1954, Hayes pulled himself together to attend the dedication of the Marine Corps War Memorial at Arlington Cemetery. Again, he was lauded as a hero, this time by another president, Dwight Eisenhower. Neither man could know that less than 3 months later, Hayes would be buried in that same national cemetery. In late January 1955, Hayes was found dead outside the adobe hut where he was living on the Gila River Reservation. Coroner listed the cause of death as alcohol poisoning and exposure. Ira Hayes, national hero, was just 32 years old, was a lonely and miserable end. Call it whatever you want: battle fatigue, nervous exhaustion, combat disorder, survivor's guilt, post-traumatic stress. Ira Hayes had it. And he represents the thousands of other soldiers who have come home with deep wounds to their spirit and their minds from what they experienced in war, things that those of us who have never served in combat cannot even imagine. There's a military tradition that probably extends back to the beginning of time, but it's expressed in our day in the Latin phrase, nemo residio. It means leave no one behind. It is a promise soldiers have made to each other throughout the centuries. It means if you fall on the field of battle, your comrades will bring you home to your country, to your loved ones. We don't abandon our dead. We don't abandon our wounded. But once they're off the battlefield, over the decades, once they're home, we do abandon them. In thousands and thousands of cases, we left their spirit and mind trapped on the battlefield where they endlessly relive their trauma. left untreated and lacking any other way to cope, they try to escape or silence their demons in destructive ways. Substance abuse, violence, even suicide. Ira Hayes represents them all. How many other veterans of our nation's many wars have followed a similar trajectory to self-destruction? It breaks my heart to just think about it. Because even now in 2020, when we know more than we ever have about post-traumatic stress and how to treat it, about how the experiences that live in our amygdala and never go into the past, never go into our memory banks, they are always presently experienced. We still have thousands of troubled veterans living on our streets, in homeless camps, filling our jails and our prisons. Here in Ohio, we are really lucky to have two fantastic leaders, people who have put a spotlight on this issue. One is with us today, is a former Ohio Supreme Court Justice Eve Stratton, who has been a champion of veterans and veterans courts for 2 decades. And another is somebody you're very familiar with, our current Ohio Supreme Court Justice, Sharon Kennedy. We're putting together a program to help local law enforcement, veterans officials, court personnel, and social service providers to create veteran response teams in communities across Ohio. We want to see teams that combine veteran-specific knowledge with crisis intervention training. We'd also like to see officers who are veterans themselves to be part of these teams. We want them to display their insignia on their police uniforms, identifying them as veterans to signal their solidarity with veterans. In a few places where these teams are already up and running at a local level, I've talked with veterans who have gotten in trouble and had a crisis moment, encountered a police officer and recognized the insignia, how it gave them something to hold on to, a touchstone of familiarity, that this was an officer who was a fellow soldier, who knew what they were dealing with. The idea for these teams is that they're prepared to respond around the clock whenever a veteran is in crisis, and we'd like these teams to be linked closely to local veterans courts. Teams will be prepared to guide veterans to all the services available to them and to smooth the way for them as much as is possible. We've been surveying the state to see which communities have veterans crisis teams and which don't. Cincinnati and Dayton already have effective programs. Toledo, Lucas County, Hamilton County are developing them. In fact, you'll be hearing from some experts on that topic at the 1:30 presentation. We want to learn from experts like these and then encourage them to help other communities to follow their lead. We want to create a pro-veteran ethos in every community. That ethos would go something like this. If we have a veteran living homeless on our streets, if we have a veteran who's cycling in and out of a jail or a prison, if we have a veteran who is in the grip of addiction, if a veteran in our community takes his own life, then we haven't done our job. We have 2 holidays each year to honor veterans. Memorial Day, we remember those who died in uniform. Veterans Day is when we thank all those who have served. On those days, we sincerely acknowledge that we owe an endless and unpayable debt of gratitude to these men and women. But frequently, when these holidays are over, these sentiments quickly fade. Attending a Veterans Day parade is a fine thing to do. Putting flag or flowers on the grave of a veteran is a good thing. But what about helping out the veteran's buddy who survived the war but now struggles to cope with the psychological aftermath. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. That's why you're part of this event today. All of you here today are deeply committed to helping our wounded veterans. But part of our mission, part of my mission with the microphone that I've been given for a little bit of time has to be to preach this message to Ohio, to our communities, to the American public. Nemo residio. No one left behind. Thanks for being part of that mission.